Andrew.
Laura.
Bruce Lambert. Can anybody talk to me on the audio?
Can you hear me? This is Laura.
Yeah, Laura, you sound very faint, but I can hear you.
Michael Henry.
Hey, Michael, how's it going?
It's going.
Well, I'm glad to know that you're there since you do all the work for everybody else in the department.
Well, thanks.
Isn't that what Virginia said?
Yeah, that's what she said.
We got it on tape. We got it somewhere. So, Eric, you're able to get on?
Hey, Thomas Hill.
Hey, Thomas.
Hey, I'm having a problem signing in.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm actually having a problem signing into a web page.
Well, I've got it up on this. Really? You're not seeing the image at all?
No, I just my screen says page can't be displayed. I don't know. Is anybody else signed on?
Is anybody else seeing the image that says statewide Bluetooth data collection?
I'm seeing it.
What browser are you using, Thomas?
Explorer. I was just on it, and then suddenly, conference. I'm going to try a different route. Hold on a second. I think I'm just getting blasted by my firewall at the moment.
Yeah, I'm laughing. It'd be a short presentation if you came to see your presentation.
I use the freeconferencecall.com page. How do you bring up the presentation?
Join a meeting.
Bruce?
I brought it up through, basically, because I'm hosting it, I actually am sharing my screen. So I actually am sharing a screen, and when it goes back to Thomas, then it'd go to open up in a browser. So that's why I'm kind of, it might just be, I just have to I'll be doing the clicks this time, and he says yay or nay, so.
Hey, Bruce, this is Phil. I'm getting the presentation.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm actually on the freeconferencecall.com webpage. It says join a meeting. The meeting ID, which is 660-907, and it's telling me it's not available.
Oh, you got to do the Bruce, the Bruce 2 call. Yeah.
Bruce 2. Please wait.
Oh, I had to rejoin the meeting. For some reason, I lost it. But now I've got something that says statewide Bluetooth data collection.
That's it.
Am I supposed to be looking at a window that says statewide Bluetooth data collection?
Yes, Phil.
Thank you.
Now, let's see if this works. Yay, I'm in.
Okay.
That'll work.
I didn't mean to make it so complicated.
Citrix, man. Can we use Citrix next time?
Well, no, because this is free and it's in the budget, so.
All right.
Anyway, well, it's 5 after, Thomas, and if you're ready, and we have, I already have 15 people on the call. I don't know who they are. I mean, some people, myself, have called in and dialed in at the same time. So why don't we just go through a list of who's here, and then we can get started. And tell us a little bit about what you do so that Thomas can at least have a little idea of the people that are on the call. So
This
I
is
guess,
Laura Phillips. I'm with the Louisiana DOTD, and I manage Bruce.
Good luck with that. It's Philip Jones, Louisiana DOTD. I'm head of the intermodal division. That's airports, ports, railroads, just about everything except highways.
I'll go next. I'm Michael Henry. I work for the Arkansas Highway and Transportation Department. I'm a transportation planning engineer, and as Bruce alluded to earlier, I do a little bit of everything.
okay, I don't know who else is joining the call, but anybody else that didn't do an introduction?
Hey, Bruce.
Yes.
Virginia is in on the call now.
Okay, good. Thanks, Eric.
I got another participant that's going to be in our room soon. So you guys haven't heard yet.
Well, at this point in time, Thomas, I don't think anybody else is joined. I don't know, and if we do, then that's fine. But for the sake of time, I think we should just go ahead and start the presentation.
Sure.
And I'm gonna see if I can give you the screen, and if not, then I'll
private show.
Yeah, that's not going to work. Yeah, we did this like 5 times, and there's something.
Okay, it didn't work. Okay, well, I have it, and just let me know.
Yeah. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Thomas Hill. I'm with the Florida Department of Transportation. I manage our statewide modeling division and our freight and modal data section. So today we're going to talk a little bit about kind of an initiative we have here in Florida using Bluetooth and Bluetooth receivers, creating a set of screen lines in Florida And so I had a brief...
Wait, Thomas, before you get started, explain to them what a screen line is, because I don't know if everybody understands that term.
We're going to. I've actually got some a couple of illustrations on that. So we're going to do a little bit of a background, essentially, on what Bluetooth receivers are, what kind of Bluetooth technology gives you, and then kind of look through some of our data collection devices, and then talk about our statewide initiative. And that way, kind of set the stage for what we're doing. I'm sure there's kind of a mix of abilities or exposure. So I kind of wanted to touch really just on some of the basics and then move into our project. So Bruce, if you will, just kind of next slide.
Okay.
So some of the Bluetooth basics. Next slide. Yeah, there we go. So essentially, anytime that you have a wireless sending unit, and this can be either your wireless headphones, your smartphone, your TomTom devices, XM radio, even if you have tire pressure monitoring devices, these things all work under Bluetooth. And all these things have a MAC address, which is a Media Access Control address. This address it's unique to whatever device you're using. It is anonymous. You can't track this to your phone or to whatever device is actually sending it. And it is in practically everything. I would suggest anybody that's got a relatively new car, you've probably got 4 or 5 different units that are sending out a MAC address. Next slide. But all this kind of data that's out there, we can start picking this up. We can start logging the MAC addresses, and there are a number of ways in which we can do this. We have a number of portable devices, and we have permanent mounted devices. These things basically can go anywhere. If you've ever seen what looks like a suitcase on the side of the road, that's likely a Bluetooth receiver that can pick it up. These are kind of some field examples that we're here in Florida using some portable units. They're compact. They're easy to install. Next slide.
Wait, Thomas, before you get to that, did you have legislative coverage to let you implement these systems, or you didn't need any legislative authorization?
I didn't need legislative authorization, but I did go up to my admin. I've spoken to my district secretary and my chief financial officer and our assistant secretaries for the department and our legal team, but I didn't need legislative authority to do this.
Okay.
And just as an aside, I know they do this in Lafayette, Louisiana with the local government, and there was no legal problem with it. They're just putting laptops in traffic in the boxes where they managed the traffic signals, and they just were sticking laptops in there and picking up the signals.
Yeah, it's fairly anonymous. I mean, the MAC address in itself is anonymous, but when we collect it, we even truncate the MAC address. So essentially, we don't even get the full address.
Okay.
So there's really no way to tag this back to anybody if there's a privacy concern. Next slide, please. Our units can either be powered by battery, solar, or hardwired in. There's a number of ways to communicate back with our units, either cellular, through an Ethernet, through a direct download, having a tech go out to the unit and just downloading directly. The raw output is just a text-delimited file. And then once you've got that raw data, the magic happens back at the office, and that's where you do the filtering, and either you work with a vendor or you do it in-house. But there's a lot of filtering that needs to occur in order to make the data viable. Next slide. So the way these things work is if you're an automobile and you're out there and you're passing through a section where we've got some receivers. I mean, these receivers are essentially picking up that MAC address. It's giving a timestamp, and it's giving it a unit number. That unit number has a lat long. Next slide. And then all that's getting pumped out to the World Wide Web, right? We're just sending that all back. And essentially what we're doing, when you stamp it, you're getting, you're able to pull out that distance, because we know once you set these receivers in place, like either you're mounting them on a pole or a light pole or a bridge, you know where they're at. You have a lat long, and you know the distance between one to another. So you get that distance, and then once it stamps the time, next slide, sorry. And once you stamp that time, then it's just a matter of just doing some simple math. Again, here, if you're passing by Station A, it's 2 miles. We know it's 2 miles. Station B, you're getting that time stamp, and then essentially you're getting travel time and speed. Right? The table down below is really just kind of an example of some raw data that we dropped in. We don't really need to speak so much to the table, but it's a good way to kind of look at your data. If you're beginning at Station A and you're progressing out along a particular corridor, this particular one was actually on I-10, that you would expect to see your travel times increase. So this is the way to kind of sniff the data, make sure that everything's functioning correctly. Next slide.
Well, wait, Thomas. So you actually have both the interstates done, and then you have, I guess, collectors or ramps or something, so you can actually, the goal is to track the travel time through multiple points?
Yeah, and I'll show that to you here in a second.
Okay.
So just kind of backtracking, how do we collect data? Next slide. We've always traditionally we've done roadside surveys, trackable logs, license plates capture. So we've done these kind of different surveys, and they have different kind of detection ratios or abilities to capture data. Next slide. And this is really just kind of justification of why we actually really wanted to go into this kind of Bluetooth and get some data out of it. But, roadside surveys, you'd get a sample rate of less than 1%. Travel logs, really it depends on how what you can. Actually, in Florida, we can't pull anybody over and give a travel log anymore. Collecting license plates were less than 10%. And what we've found with Bluetooth is that we can get anywhere from 10 to 15% detection ratios, which for any study is significant. I mean, it's really good data coming back. And it's really about matching them. The farther you get, the larger spacing between your units, obviously, your detection ratio goes down. Next slide, Bruce. So with that kind of out there, throwing that out, talking a little bit then about our statewide initiative. Next slide. So we started a couple projects, and this is kind of one of two. Two of them are both working in. But here and speaking directly to this. So what you see on screen is a set of yellow lines, right? And this is the state of Florida. And these yellow lines are sectionally screen lines, right? They're points at which we can watch traffic go past a particular point. So if you start at the north, we have all of our major roadways. The red dots you see there are Bluetooth receivers, and those are our major roadways coming in and out of the state of Florida. So from the west, I-10, and then 29 to the north, all the way over to 75 and 95 towards the east. And then we place these in strategic locations. Not only have we placed them within a straight line or as approximate a straight line, we've also tagged them into our telemetered site so that we can get a detection to count ratio, so we can get a better understanding about how much of the traffic stream we're actually picking up. And then what's really good out of this is what we really wanted to do was get data so that we can best calibrate, our statewide freight model. We have a commodity-based statewide model. Instead of doing your standard generation by ITE codes and size of development, we're actually converting all of the commodities that come in and out of the state of Florida into travel modes such as rail, air, and freight movement. It is pretty cutting edge, and what we wanted was cutting edge data to kind of back it up and validate our freight model essentially. So we've gone to all of our ports. One of the things about MAC addresses is that you don't know what it is, right? You don't know if it's a truck. You don't know if it's an automobile. So we wanted the ability to identify trucks only within our network. So what we've done is we've gone to all of our ports, and we have 15 ports in the state of Florida, and we've hit the gates that are at our Florida, that there's only trucks. We know only trucks are coming in and out of these gates, right? So typically you separate your automobile traffic from your truck traffic. So what we've done is we hit all of our ports with, or the gates at our ports with a Bluetooth receiver, and that allows us to filter the data that we're going to collect. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. I've got a couple slides on this. But it allows us to filter it and only have trucks. We can represent all traffic within the state of Florida, or we can represent trucks that are moving back and forth between our ports. Next slide. So this is the concept slide, and let me pause here and see if there was any questions to the statewide kind of initiative, just the background on it.
So, Thomas, you instrumented the truck traffic. Did you instrument any connectors in the rail system or airports?
No, not yet. This is we are testing a permanent system. We put in a portable system right now, a temporary system, testing does our hypothesis work, and B, if it does work, well then are we in the right locations? We didn't want to start putting units out there with permanent installations, and then maybe you need it to be an interchange down, so we're kind of testing our location and then testing our ability to kind of acquire the data right now. So what we anticipate here is that we have benefits from the data that we're going to collect. We know we're going to be able to pull in some really good travel time information, both from an origin and destination perspective and just pure speeds across our network that we can use to help to better calibrate our statewide model. We typically calibrate, validate to counts, but level of service and capacity is really, particularly on your interstate system, is more about travel speeds than it is and densities, but level of service and capacity is really more about speed than it is simply capacity. The interstate system, it really is a density function, but we think that we can better calculate or calibrate our statewide model by having speed data. And then this gives us a better understanding of movements between our urbanized areas. We can synthesize this all day in our statewide model, but we think that having this Bluetooth data that we can filter out enough so that we can say, well, we have these origins, say in Tampa, and 35% of those end up in Jacksonville. And these are trips that we know that we can track back and forth. We can then track our interstate movements, and this really actually becomes very important when we start talking about, for the state of Florida, one of the big things that one of our backbones in the economy is our tourists and our visitors to the state of Florida. So we want to make sure that our interstates are serving the demand that's being generated, particularly demand that's being generated from outside the state into the state. And then on our trip length calculations, so again, those lines that we saw on the map, the yellow line, and then it gives us an idea of how far people are traveling, and particularly freight movements. If you have origins starting at, say, Port of Miami, are those origins going out of the state? If not, how far are they going through the state? And if they are going throughout the state, how long does it take them to complete their trip? And then these are also potentials for enhancing performance measures for MAP 21. Each of our MPOs have to do answer a set of questions that are performance related. There's actually a finer resolution of Bluetooth receivers in the state. This will give us long distance trips. We're talking at the state level. Again, working with our freight movements, we think that we'll be able to track our trucks, and we actively have tracked our truck movements. And then if you park a hurricane, this is really kind of interesting. It's exciting, and you don't want to see something happen, but if you park a hurricane off the state of Florida, say down by Miami, this is real-time incident management, right? This is all stuff that feeds back to our ITS system, to our emergency management situations. And you can see, well, okay, I got 95 starting to load up, and here's my travel time on 95. Let's divert traffic. So we have a vast network of variable information signs, and this is stuff you can get back to your media. So we think this is really real-time information that we can provide back for hurricane and incident management, and something I think Louisiana we would have been great there a few years ago. Next slide. So one of the other things that we also have ongoing right now, and this kind of ties in, we're talking about an A and a B, but we're building a micro simulation model for our ports, and the idea is to see, well, how long does it take product to get from the ship through the port, and then once it clears the port, well, I've got a micro simulation model that's essentially a 5-mile catchment area around the port. And as that product hits our network, how long does it take to clear out of that catchment area and get onto our primary network? Next slide.
Well, Thomas, so the thing is, when you did this, you stayed only on your network? You didn't go to the local network?
No, actually, within the 5-mile catchment area, the microsimulation, we hit pretty much all the major collectors and major arterials within that 5-mile area, and it actually incorporates a rail product. So if the port, for example, if the Port Everglades decides to increase rail shipments through and out, we have a good estimate of or an ability to estimate what does that do to our at-grade intersections if we increase a freight shipment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next
so
slide.
this ties into our Bluetooth. So in order to help better calibrate kind of this kind of information, we've got Bluetooth receivers that are surrounding the port and then tying in kind of that information as the products leave the port. We have a good idea about how long it takes to get in and out of the state. So next slide, that'll kind of show how this is all linked together.
Thomas, this is Phil. On that note right there, and maybe I'm jumping ahead of you, but we frequently talk in terms of here's what you can find out. How long does it take to get through Port Everglades? Do you have any examples of where something's been done with that data? For example, you found out that X amount was coming off of one of the highways versus another highway, so that allowed you to justify putting in an egress ramp or something like that. Do you have any examples of where you actually use the data for a management decision?
Yeah, well, that is the intent. Our microsimulation isn't quite complete yet. We're still validating that process. We should be done in December. And then we've only been out with our Bluetooth receivers a couple weeks. I mean, this is infancy right now. So it hasn't had enough time to kind of gel and then feed back into our system. Essentially, what's going to happen is the microsimulation model is going to work in tandem with both the port and the district, while the overall Bluetooth screen line is going to be kind of a more statewide perspective. We anticipate that it is going to have those kind of impacts. We just haven't got there yet.
Okay, thanks.
So again, tracking our movements throughout the state. It's kind of so as we move out from our microsimulation, to a statewide perspective, this is all kind of our multi-resolution modeling process and an ability to kind of track these movements as product moves in and out of the state. And if anything, it does set a benchmark. Again, you find out what's going on right now, and then next year, is there, or months from now, or even seasonally, how does these movements get impacted by seasonal traffic, right? I mean, we have, you end up with a freight increase on your network sometime around September. Stores getting ready for the holidays, and then decreasing in that February time frame where there's a lull. But being able to track kind of these movements and your overall performance in your network.
I'm sorry, Thomas.
Next slide.
I didn't quite understand what you were saying about a micro simulation. Could you just explain that again?
I didn't quite hear the question, but I think the question was about the microsimulation model for Everglades. It's actually another discussion. I was just kind of showing how the microsimulation tied into our Bluetooth
What is
project.
the microsimulation?
Oh, we built a microsimulation model for Port Everglades.
Oh, okay.
So it's internal to Port Everglades, so that as commodities come into the port, that we can measure delays that are occurring. So if we have an increase in commodities or an increase, Port Everglades also serves cruise traffic. So if there are more let's say if there's more activity going on, we can monitor how long it takes to clear the port. But that microsimulation also includes a 5-mile catchment area outside of the port. So not only can we look at movements within the port and how long does it take to clear it, but once they clear the port, then how long does it take to get out to our primary network, our interstate system?
And is that microsimulation Bluetooth data?
Well, the Bluetooth data flows into our microsimulation in order to calibrate our model.
Oh. So you don't have Bluetooth, you're not catching Bluetooth devices that are on crates or containers in the port and checking.
It's not on freight or containers. Our Bluetooth is actually at the gate. So whatever's passing through, they're separate gates at Port Everglades. One's simply cruise traffic, the other one's freight traffic. So as product is moving out, we just take the freight, for example, as that's moving out of the port, we know it's a truck. We don't know what commodity is, but I know it's a truck, and I can track that through the network, and I can tell you how long it takes to get to our interstate system.
Thanks.
Next slide, Bruce. So essentially, summing that up, our phase one, which both of these phases are actually underway, is establish that screen line network. These are the yellow lines that you see, and the red dots are essentially where we have placed our Bluetooth receivers, and then kind of using that to detail our port connections. Again, tying our microsimulation models into our using the Bluetooth receivers to kind of better calibrate our microsimulation models that we've created. But Port Everglades, we're going to start working on Tampa here shortly. Next slide.
Okay, Tom, back to this slide. So
Yep.
Why are you focusing on Tampa? Are you doing a simulation on them?
We're going to do all of our ports. We just had to pick one. That was Port Everglades. We started there. We're going to go over to Tampa next, probably Panama City and Jacksonville after that.
Okay. So, and the idea is once you get all the ports done, then you'll move to, other major generators, I guess, over time.
Yeah. It would be nice to. I don't have a rail. I mean, we do rail modeling, but it's only from a mode perspective. We don't actually place that out on the network, and that would be really cool to do, but we haven't quite got that far yet. We have 15 ports in the state of Florida. It's going to take us a while to get through them.
Okay, and then each port will have a microsimulation tied to it as well, correct?
Yes.
And that's a lot of work.
Well, we started out with the pilot project, and then once we've kind of figured out what we wanted to do and how we were going to do it, then we can break off 2 or 3 at a time.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a lot of work, and I don't know if we'll hit all 15. Most likely the major ones, again, Tampa, Jacksonville, Miami, and then we'll switch down to the Panama City, Pensacola ports.
Fernando Beach or Fernandina Beach should be easy to do.
Yeah, it would, and they're tied into Jacksonville. We might just do them both at the same time.
Okay.
So, next slide. So our overview here with our project was essentially conceived as a way to quantify trips between Florida, using these screen line data, strategic intervals. We think that we're going to be able to identify travel behaviors that will help us with our statewide model validation. And then also capturing that port traffic is going to help us, again, validate and calibrate our truck model through either truck trip origins or also through travel times. And then we've also hit our readers located at the traffic monitoring sites. That's, again, for that kind of detection to count ratio to give us an idea of how well they're receiving. Oh, and by the way, we've also hit them with, or our next step here is to hit with our weigh in motion sites as well, and that way we can kind of track that back.
Wait. So you're integrating this with your WIM data as well?
Yes. Well, we haven't done that yet. That is our next step. Because one of the big issues out of Florida, as a peninsula, we have a lot of empty trucks that are moving out of the state. So, if we can have a better idea about where those trucks are coming from, what's their origin, what's their destination, then we can have a better idea about how do we help fill those trucks up as they're leaving the state.
Okay.
We do have standalone units. Our units are solar powered, and we have a cell phone service for remote data collection. So essentially, they're hands off. They do send us a pulse check. What's interesting about the units that we're using is that every 15 minutes, 20 minutes, they just send you a pulse and say, "Hey, I'm good. I'm still operating." They do the self-diagnostic, and then it just kind of sends it out. And anytime that there's an issue, then you get this warning sign up that comes up real time on your from your website for your dashboard. Says, "Hey, I've got an issue out here," and then you can send someone out to kind of take care of it real fast. Currently we have 48 locations tied around the state. We have over 1,000 units in the state, which we anticipate being able to tie together in the future. But right now, this particular project is only using 48 locations. Next slide.
Thomas, this is Phil again. Are you planning on or doing any outreach to Alabama and Georgia?
Yeah, you're a little. I've got a couple slides on that. We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Phil, just to let you know, I know that Stacy's on the line, even though he didn't say introduction. He's with Georgia, and I did invite Alabama to participate in this call.
Okay. That's an obvious thing you're determining destinations.
Yeah,
origin.
Absolutely. I agree with you full-hearted, and I've talked to Vidya Mysore at FHWA about the same topic. He's very interested in doing something. We'll talk about that. I've got that at the end, and we'll run from there. But this is actually I just pulled out some screenshots from our website. This is kind of internal to us, looking at the data. Again, we've only been out a couple weeks just collecting data. We were out for about a week just letting the system settle down, making sure our connections together. And then so now we're able to kind of pull out some information. We're still working on our algorithms, but I think we've got enough to show here. And this is so the image that you see at the top. The B node in that map is Blunt Island in Jacksonville. And then so we're just able to track. So if I have a trip that has an origin in Blunt Island and I want to see what's going out in I-95 northbound, these are trips that we can identify and just pulls it right out, right? And it just filters right out. And there's our distance and our expected travel time. Now, our expected travel time is essentially all trips, right? This is just it's a rolling average. As things continue along, you get this kind of estimated travel time between these two locations, and then your average travel speed, your median travel speeds, and then some other summary statistics. So you kind of see this in all one big, nice, condensed snapshot. The graphic at the bottom is really just kind of showing some of the raw data as it's been pumped in. Now, this is just 6 days of data in this particular snapshot. But also what's interesting about this is that you can pull out diurnal information, and as you want a 15-minute time slice that's occurring at 7 o'clock in the morning, then that's all data that you can pull out, because this is, you're collecting data every second of every day, 24 hours a day. And then what you see in the screen, these kind of linking things up, is that you have some outliers that are occurring. We filter that kind of data out. It's not, we want our average. There are things that are occurring. There's some gray dots in here where we don't have a match for it. So those get kind of picked out of the equation while tying everything else in. Just kind of looking graphically at the raw data. Next slide.
Thomas, before we get going, how hard was it to snap this data set to your GIS platforms? You're talking about data quality issues here, but did you have to do a lot of lat-long positioning and keeping the MAC address?
Yeah, when we installed the units, we had to get we took a lat-long. So we had when our tech was out there, you install the unit and then just got his lat-long right at the location, and then we put that into there. That's an input basically into your.
So you're not keeping the lat-long of what lane, anything by lane. It's just simply you caught the data at this.
No. But directionality is all a matter of timestamp, right? Because you can figure out the directionality based on the time. So I know I've got a match between, say, E and D. And so if my E, I get is 8 o'clock, and my D is 8:16, well, I've got the directionality, right?
Well, and you're just assuming they went on the route that you highlighted in green, even though they could have stopped somewhere in transit and got a Coke and a...
Yeah, I mean, there's some things we have to filter out. But see, if you have a dwell time, we filter out the dwell time. So if somebody, pulls off the road, stays overnight, we filter that out. Although we can pick that up. It depends on the time frame that you're looking at. So if you're looking at an urban environment, within an hour, it's easy to do that kind of diurnal factoring. I've got a dwell time over here of 30 minutes. Let's just knock it out. But then, say it's a 200 or 300 mile trip. Well, that's a different kind of story, right? I mean,
right.
Then how long do I, what then is my filtering based on my dwell time? And those are things that we're working out now. We're kind of, we're playing with different kind of dwell times, and do you have anything longer than 8 hours? And what we're thinking that probably 8 hours is the best.
Yes,
it's
Thomas.
Kind of that area we want to be in.
Thomas, I was just wondering if there's any way this information could help inform truck parking.
So the question is essentially, will this feed into truck parking?
Yes. Yes. Is there any way you think it could be used for that?
That's a great question. I hadn't even thought of that. No, I mean, yeah, possibly. We have another project that's going on where we are putting essentially sensors, a set of pucks, into our rest areas and our service areas so that we know kind of the utilization factor that's going on. We can transmit directly information to commuters on the road and say, well, there's parking spaces available here, or there's not, via an app, or even via our variable message signs. But I haven't thought about tagging in our Bluetooth data with that. That's an interesting thought. I'll mull that over.
Yeah,
I like
thinking
it. If I use it, I'll give you credit.
I was thinking if you could put some of the Bluetooth detectors at truck stops, or I'm also wondering, so you can see which truck stops are being used, but I don't guess there's any way to tell if truckers are just pulling off on the side of the road and stopping. That would...
Yeah, all good questions.
Okay.
Right now,
yeah,
what we're trying to do is flex our muscles and say, hey, we can do this, and then go from there.
Yeah.
Good points though. Bruce, next slide.
Okay.
So this is kind of an illustration of origin destination. Now, simply, we're not doing any routing here. What we're doing is matching up from one location to all other locations. In this case, in the center of your screen, this is just south of Gainesville. We just picked a location. And so where are our vehicles going? In this case, we were looking at I-75. Essentially, 75% of your trips are moving up I-75. That's that big turquoise line. That's the bulk of your trips that are coming into the state and through this point or out of the state from this via this point. What's interesting is really kind of that line to the south. What you're seeing is people are movements that are coming into state 75 and then kind of making their way over to 95 via US 40. That was something that I actually hadn't anticipated seeing. But then also there's a fairly large, substantial move. We have a number receiver in Jacksonville that we were tracking back to. Two of those being different port locations, the other ones being kind of warehouse distribution areas. But being able to track those movements, so as it's coming through these sites, and then what's essentially is the demand location. You see most of this is either entering or exiting the state. Next slide. And then the next slide is really just kind of the raw data breakdown. I apologize for the graphic there on the screen. It looked, when I did a screenshot of it, it looked pretty good, but it kind of lost some of the resolution as I brought it in. But the point of this is that you can track the number of trips and the percentage by location, right? So from any one particular location to all other locations, you can get that kind of distribution of trips and see where that demand is occurring out of any particular site. Next slide. And again, so this was out of our Talleyrand, and Jacksonville has 2 port locations, Talleyrand being the one that's located downtown. So just essentially picking that location, and again, where our trips being distributed to. Some of this makes sense, out to I-10, this actually Quincy, and then north up into Alabama, which is that Dothan area. And then 75, of course. But then what's really kind of interesting is that most of these trips actually end within the Jacksonville urbanized area, and is telling you that essentially a lot of the stuff that's coming in through Talleyrand is being transported as drayage trips, essentially being transported and then shipped out. Next.
Maybe it's like going to receivers and distribution?
Yeah, actually, this is just telling you your distribution out of Talleyrand. Now, we didn't pick all locations. I mean, certainly, we could have tracked this a little bit farther out, but you had to pick enough in order to talk. Again, this is just kind of the data illustration of the last graphic we looked at. Again, that percentage of distribution out I-10, for example, and up I-95. And so you can see it graphically, you can see it visually, and then also the data is there. Next. So before I move on, essentially that's where we are in Florida, and I'll move on to some of the Bluetooth initiatives, but wanted to pause here and see if there were any other questions on kind of the data that we were pulling in. We're in our infancy in mining the data. We've got a couple weeks of data that we've been able to grab our hands onto and kind of put something together for this. But as this starts flowing in, we think that we can see longer trips that are occurring throughout the state. And really, what we want to be able to do is track those trips that are occurring in the port of Miami. How long does it take to clear the state? And does that kind of trip or trip purpose, and even that distribution of trips, does that change over time? It's a long-term kind of look. It's not just data that's flowing into our statewide model, but it's also kind of real-time data that helps us out operationally and gives us a better understanding. Because essentially, if you don't know what's going on with the movement of traffic in your state, you can't really address then, how best to make investments into your infrastructure. And this is I think these are some really good data that's going to help us get a better understanding about not just how much traffic is out on our road, but why is it out on our road and where is it really going?
Hey, Tom?
Yeah.
This is Eric Johnson from Virginia. I have a couple other folks in our room here from the Traffic Engineering Division. We have a question.
Sure.
So I'm going to turn it over here.
Yeah, hi. This is Sanhita. I basically manage the system analysis here. Just a couple of questions regarding the screen lines that were set up. I understand the importance of the screen lines. I was just trying to understand, was there any basis how you set up the screen lines?
Typically, there were a couple of reasons why we set up. Some of them is that we wanted to be able to, each one of those screen lines has at least one telemetered site on it, so that we can get kind of actually I think all of them do. All of those sites that we have identified have a telemetered site on it, so we can get kind of this detection ratio detection to count. And then geographically, they kind of match up in terms of capturing kind of where our urbanized areas are, our major urbanized areas are. So we have some that are just north of Orlando, just south of Orlando, just north of Miami. So essentially where you have these major generations of freight trips, we want it to kind of be in proximity to these kind of urbanized areas where demand is being generated or there's demand is going to be attracted to.
Okay. Thank you. Also, the other question kind of related to that was, so for example, Port of Miami, not all traffic. And then maybe the image that was shown did not have. I could not see all the screen lines probably, but from what I saw there was some near Okeechobee. So like for example, the Port of Miami truck that all leaves there, possibly the destinations are much before it gets to Okeechobee. Like, for example, leaves Miami, goes to Broward or whatever.
Right.
So how was that getting captured?
Well, there's a set of internal trips that are going to. There's a large number of internal trips that we anticipate occurring that are not going to cross our screen line, and these are trips that we can make some assumptions about. But I think Bruce, we have what's interesting is that we'll be able to tie in locally to kind of the local resolution. Bruce, can you flip it forward? This will make things a little bit easier. Another one. We'll come back to this stuff later. There. So in Florida, so we have on our particular, at the statewide level, we have these screen lines that we set up. But there are over 1,000 units of Bluetooth receivers already in Florida. So as we see a number of trips that are occurring that are not passing our screen line, say for example in Miami, we can basically track those trips using local data sources. We have a pretty good resolution in Miami and Fort Lauderdale of Bluetooth receivers, and we want these units to be able to communicate back and forth with each other. Essentially, what we want to do is tie all of these 1,000 units into one system, so that we can track not only from a statewide perspective, but what's also occurring at the localized level.
I understand.
So you're right in that the resolution that we have at the screen line level, we're going to lose a lot of trips that are essentially internal trips.
Okay. If I may.
But again, we are modeling at a statewide perspective. My interest from my perspective is, what's occurring in the state and what are those bottlenecks that are occurring, from a state perspective, right, from a global perspective, and then, we have our MPOs and our districts to look at those kind of localized last mile movements.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. I have one last question, if I may.
Sure.
While you're collecting the data, at what geographic granularity are you getting that data? I mean, like a lane level, are you able to get that?
No, we're not getting lane level. We're only getting really facility level movements. For Bluetooth, it's really kind of hard to neck down. You have essentially a conical shape, and you can form that shape a little bit so that you're not taking up, say, if you're in an overpass, you're not taking up the road underneath. But you can't really direct it to any particular lane, right? It's not that fine a resolution. You can't really tune it in that much. We are able to kind of get directionality. So if you have a 2-lane, I can pick up directionality, but what I can't do is pick up any individual lane. Say, like if I have a 6-lane, I can't do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. So go back a couple slides there, Bruce. Sorry, we'll go back to the Bluetooth initiatives. Moving one more forward. So, the question came up. So, what's going on with Georgia and Alabama? It's a great question. We're with you on that. Actually, we have a little bit more than 900 Bluetooth units deployed throughout the state. Georgia has approximately 57 units currently deployed. I know they have another initiative where they're putting them along I-95, I-75, but there's a whole lot of units around the metro Atlanta area. And then the Alabama DOT also has a fairly rigorous, a nice project going on where they've installed a number of Bluetooth units, mostly I think in the South Alabama region. This is all data that can be tied together, right? Essentially, the industry in itself says, well, my data only talks to my data, but Florida, Georgia, Alabama, I think mostly use TrafficCast Bluetooth receivers. Most of the 900 that you see here out of the 1,000, those are TrafficCast Bluetooth receivers as well. So all of that stuff will talk internally. These are things that we can do to kind of link these things up. So not only can you see what's going on from a statewide perspective, but as product is moving outside of your state, where does that, what's that ultimate destination for our freight model, FreightSim, the Florida freight model? We model not only on a statewide level, we actually model nationally, because what we're trying to do is match up the commodities that are being generated in Florida and then track it all the way to its ultimate destination, whether that's in California, whether that's in Virginia or Alabama or in Georgia. So all this kind of data would certainly help me kind of better calibrate my model, but I think it's also really good data to kind of get an understanding of what's happening regionally. Next slide.
Oh, real quick. Thomas, so you use this TrafficCast as a... I'm sorry?
I had a little feedback on you there, Bruce.
I see that. Is TrafficCast a third-party vendor that does the actual collection for you?
Not currently for what we're doing right now. We're doing this in-house, but if we do a permanent... if we do something permanently, then they're probably one of two that we would consider. I know that most of the units that are in Florida are TrafficCast, and all those districts have their own individual accounts with TrafficCast. We would probably aggregate that up and make use of everybody's kind of installment. But really, one of the things I think we as the state need to do, we need to standardize the Bluetooth technology much in the same way that we standardize, say, count technology on our roadway, and that it doesn't matter what vendor you're going to meet certain parameters, and kind of Bluetooth is out there, and it just come onto the market really fast, and we don't have those standards in place, so one vendor doesn't actually have to talk to another vendor, and I don't think that's good business for the state of Florida. One of the things we obviously need to do is say, well, if you're going to do business in Florida, you're going to meet these parameters, and your units are going to talk to everybody else's units. And right now, that's not happening.
Hey, Tom?
Yeah.
This is Eric from Virginia again. Y'all have the continuous count loops on your interstates, kind of like we do, right?
Yes.
Now, my understanding is that those can collect speed as well.
Ours don't.
Yours don't?
I wouldn't trust it if it did.
Maybe we don't store that data, but I do. I have seen it in action.
I know that on the we have some detection devices that are mounted on the back of our variable message signs, and it gets you some data, some speed data, but again, I think our ITS divisions statewide have kind of moved away from that and going more towards the Bluetooth kind of installation.
Just doing travel time rather than the actual speed of traffic.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all.
Next slide, Bruce. So graphically again, this is kind of our density map of installation of Bluetooth receivers around the state, Jacksonville, along the coast there, Orlando, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Tampa, and then surprisingly, Panama City over in the Panhandle has a pretty good density of Bluetooth receivers. Next slide. We think this is all data that we can aggregate together. This is a kind of a blow up of the city of Jacksonville. There's approximately 200 receivers in Jacksonville. They have I want to say it's an 85% coverage of all their major arterials in the region. Next slide. This is Atlanta. Again, I think there was another project that subsequent to this graphic that's putting them on I-285. But again, this is all data that's out there being collected that we should be able to tie into. I mean, we're all using the same system. Next slide, I think, is Alabama. Alabama has a number of units on I-165, 65, the southern portion, and as it's essentially it's tying straight in. If you look on I-10 coming into the state of Florida, we have a Bluetooth receiver approximately on the other side of the state line as well. So if we're using the same vendor, we're using the same technology, there's really, it would be very beneficial to kind of start tying all of our data together to kind of get this regional perspective of what's going on. And not only from freight, this is, I think there's a lot of information that we pull from both commuters and other kind of trip purposes. Next slide. I think that may have been it. Yeah, that was it. So, questions?
Yeah, one more question, Tom.
Yeah.
Can you give us a general idea or whatever how much something like this actually costs, like maybe per unit, maybe for the whole thing or whatever?
Yeah, it varies, and it depends on the level of support that you're looking to get. Now, the units that we have out there right now, we're about let's call it $3,300 each unit, which, I mean, from a state perspective, really wasn't that bad. If you're looking to get support and kind of the filtering that comes in with, say, like Traffic Cast, with a cellular plan, it'll probably come in about $5,500 a unit.
Per unit?
Yeah.
Is that's includes the 3,300?
No. Right now, what I paid for this unit that I've got out there right now is about $3,300. If I were going to go with a vendor, say with Traffic Cast, and use Bluetooth and have them host my data, store my data, filter my data, as opposed to me doing it alone in-house, that would probably be about $5,500 a year.
That would be
so it would the installation, and then you would buy essentially this package that would give you web access and storage access. Then there would be a reoccurring cost, whatever that would be. But then your initial setup would be about $5,500 a month. I mean, a unit.
Initial setup.
Well, let me ask you this, Thomas. Is there interest, and this is to the group that participated, would there be interest in us maybe having a webinar and having a couple of vendors talk about how they do the approach for the data?
I'll take that as a no.
Yeah, I hear I joke with people, music is the silence between the notes, and the silence between the notes says no.
Did we lose Tom? We may have lost him.
Who? I'm here.
Okay.
So.
Well, no. Any other questions for Thomas? Eric, are y'all doing anything like this in Virginia, or any other states that participated?
Nothing exactly like that. We have used Bluetooth for small OD studies and things like that, or to validate travel time, probe data, that type of thing. But we haven't done this large
systematic way
of collecting so much at once.
And did you find that useful for those particular smaller level quarter studies or whatever you were doing?
Absolutely. Getting the OD data from the Bluetooth was a lot more economical than the typical license plate surveys or something like that. And it appears, as far as the validation of probe data, that appears to be the preferred way to go.
Yeah, and also for calibration purposes for macro simulation, I think that's the cheapest way to get those OD data. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Any other examples in any of the other states? Okay. If there's no more questions for Thomas, thank you, Thomas. You did a great job, and I appreciate your your willingness to do this. And if anybody has any other ideas that they'd like to share with the states, let me know, and we'll see what we can do. Otherwise, thank you, Thomas, and thank all y'all who joined us on the call.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, thank you.